Well, hello and welcome to the unofficial Unreal Engine podcast, where we talk about all things Unreal Engine, also leaving out the sheets, which for anyone who doesn't know the reference is going to think I'm just, berating Jacob for swearing too much. But no, we're your hosts. My name's Alex, and
Well, if you're not going to clarify it, then that's exactly what you're doing.
Jacob, I saw Oppenheimer finally, the whole 3-hour movie today. And yes, leaving out the sheets is code for whether something was successful or not when you're talking to your wife who does not have the same security clearance as you.
I see. Okay, well, I haven't seen that movie, so no spoilers.
Okay. That's not a spoiler.
Barbie spoilers are cool. I've seen that. All right, but we'll get into it. Welcome everyone, though, and make sure you like, rate, subscribe, comment, all those things. This should be getting released right after our two-parter on the Galactic Star Cruiser.
Or you know what, Jacob? Who knows how long that one's going to take to edit? This one might come out first, but we can tell people we did record like 4 hours about Galactic Star Cruiser.
And I loved every minute of it.
It was great. We had a good time.
Awesome. Well, what are we getting into today, Alex?
All sorts of stuff. I mean, I'm still very much in a movie mode. I've been trying out this Regal Unlimited Pass, which, in theory, pays for itself if you can see 2 movies a month. And so today I saw all of Oppenheimer and quite a bit of The Sound of Freedom and Barbie, and that was a very fun mix of things. But also, while watching these films on a big proper screen, I was very drawn to thinking about what's CG and what isn't. Of course, Christopher Nolan, very well known for trying to do everything as practically as possible. There are visual effects, but not necessarily CG effects. So some of the things I think worth discussing today are a little bit of AI, some 5.3 preview stuff. We already covered the roadmap a little bit, but there's some interesting things to note about what is available now, what people are testing. I want to do a nice little recap of VRTO, VR Toronto, this wonderful event I was at a couple weeks ago. And then I want to show something that was posted to Twitter by one of our clients, which has an interesting public face to it now. I've been coy in the past, but can be a little more forthright about some of that. And I'd like to wrap up by saying, basically, Jacob, what are you excited about for SIGGRAPH? Because you will be there next week and I will not.
Yep. All right. I mean, that sounds like a pretty packed schedule. Why don't we jump into this movie conversation at the start? So,
sure.
In classic Unreal Engine, unofficial Unreal Engine podcast format, we'll start with the not relevant content. And if you stick around long enough, we'll finally get to Unreal Engine. All right.
Yeah. We don't have any ad breaks. So I feel like if people just skip ahead the way they would skip ad breaks, they'll get to the Unreal stuff.
I think at this point, if you're just here for the Unreal Engine content, you probably moved on. But look, I'm hopeful.
We don't have a lot of competitors, Jacob. There's not a lot of places to go for audio only Unreal Engine content.
Yeah. There's very little, competition in the space where you use a visual medium, or you try to explain a visual medium in audio format. But someone's got to try.
That's true. So what are you curious to hear anything more about the movie thing, or do you want to just discuss in general how the world of CG has evolved or anything like that?
Well, that's I have lots of comments on the VFX conversation, but I want to hear first, like, what did you do? So what order did you see these? What happened?
Yeah. So my kids are at summer camp right now. So I dropped them off this morning, ran over to our local Regal because I got this free pass. I did want to see Oppenheimer in a proper IMAX, but the closest IMAX to me up where I live isn't a real IMAX. It's one of those ones where they claim it is, but it's not actually the 71 millimeter proper screen. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to pay an extra $30. I'll just go and sit down and watch it. And so I did Oppenheimer, The Sound of Freedom, and then Barbie, which was a very interesting. I mean, Barbie definitely worked as a bit of a palate cleanser there at the end, but that was a very intense 4 hours going into Oppenheimer, seeing the whole thing, literally just hopping over to another theater nearby. It's all free with the Regal Pass there. And I didn't know anything about The Sound of Freedom. So I went right from very heavy, the atomic bomb movie to very heavy child trafficking movie and then to Barbie. So It was bizarre.
So starting with Oppenheimer, are you a Chris Nolan fan in general?
I am. I always find his movies, I'll say frustrating because I see what he's going for and I'm so excited about it and I love his vision. And I I always want them to be just like a little more fine-tuned or a little more emotionally vulnerable than they are. And sometimes they just feel a little bit too cold for me. But, I loved The Dark Knight. The Prestige was a huge one for me as a kid. Memento even was, of course, like we were the right age where that was a huge thing, like back in college and all that. And I think probably Oppenheimer is my favorite film of his since Inception. Yeah, because
Wow.
I
That's
liked
high praise.
Interstellar. I liked Dunkirk. I was too confused by Tenet to really like appreciate it properly. But this, for a 3-hour movie, felt like it was using a lot of his techniques and style in a really meaningful way to turn the 750-page book into something that really did work. I think the way they handled the actual the bomb itself, not doing any spoilers, but I think in general just the way that the sensitive subject matter here was handled was very well done. Incredible acting. It's amazing how many actors who you recognize from like starring in their own films show up in this movie for like 8 seconds and then they're gone.
Yeah.
Like Christopher Nolan can do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think people just come when he calls. But yeah, I mean, I've been waiting to see it. I've been trying to get tickets to the Lincoln Center
Yeah,
IMAX, and I
it's
still have no
impossible.
luck. Like, it's booked till midway through this month. They haven't released
Amazing.
any tickets for past that, and so I'm just out of luck. And man, it's gonna really suck if I have to wait to watch it. My only gleaming hope is that if I can't see it in IMAX, I can wait till this new Apple headset is out and
Ah,
then use that as my experience to view it on the IMAX screen. Though it won't be film, it won't be purist, but maybe
ooh.
I'll get the idea right.
I hope they
um
do the what is the aspect ratio, like 4:3 or something like that.
yeah, it's a weird aspect ratio, but like obviously pixels and film are different things. There's a lot going on there. I really want to see it though.
Yeah.
um but man, yeah, so many interesting actors. I love Chris Nolan, and I think the joke between my fiance and I is that, like, well, Inception is like one of my favorite, if not like my favorite movie of all time.
Sure.
I just love that movie. It's irrational to some extent. Like, there's way more thoughtful and like way more thoughtful movies to enjoy, especially as a someone who appreciates cinema. But I just really love that movie, and I feel like I've seen it more than I have anything else, and
Yeah.
that justifies in my mind at least living in that pantheon. But Tenet, I've seen Tenet too many times, and
Really?
I don't even think it's that good, but I just enjoy watching it. And so the joke between my fiance and I is that I might be the world's biggest fan of Tenet because everyone seems to disregard it, and I've seen it too many times.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I saw it once. I was halfway through the film. I kind of gave up on trying to like puzzle things out and just tried to let it wash over me and just
Yeah.
enjoy the visual experience of it all. But yeah, congratulations that you might be the world's biggest Tenet fan.
I'll take it. I'll take it. But yeah, I think there's a huge conversation here about VFX, and there's a lot of sides to this. The first one is, practical VFX and the virtues there. The other side, of course, being there was a lot of press around this being like anti VFX movie,
Yeah.
while there were still, many individuals who worked on this in VFX. Frame
Mhm.
Store had, I think, 30 people who, created this like website around, hey, we're the folks who worked on this movie. Why are
Oh
you
wow.
advertising it this way?
Mhm.
And this is all coming, of course, during the middle of the strike with Hollywood Actors Guild and Hollywood Writers and Actors Guilds.
Yeah. Super
Um,
strike.
so there's now, I think, an equal conversation coming from the VFX industry, like, well, what are we gonna do? No one wants to appreciate us. Like, half of the conversation around these strikes is like, oh, we're going to replace you with
Mhm.
AI and VFX, all these other things. And the VFX people are like, what are we? You know, like
Yeah.
you're threatening to replace us too. So I think there's a lot to be said there. I fundamentally, and I haven't seen Oppenheimer. Fundamentally, from what I've seen, like it has to be a VFX heavy movie. I think the claim was that there were no shots that were 100% CGI.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That was like the official claim, and that may or may not be accurate. I assume it is if they claim that publicly. But like I think folks don't realize how much effort goes into things like compositing and
Sure.
into
Set extensions.
yeah, set extensions, everything else. Like there's a lot, even color grading. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot that goes into post production on films like this. I don't know how that fits into like obviously what happens on film. I don't even really fully understand how you do film on a movie with VFX this complicated. Like, yeah, he might be using an IMAX camera and it may be recording in this format, but like at some point this has to be digitized so you can use Nuke and Houdini and everything else. So I have lots of questions around this, and I would love to poke the brain of someone at Framestore who worked on this, but yeah, I think there's a lot to talk about here.
That's excellent. And yeah, I mean, certainly full credit to all the amazing people who work on films. There's definitely an auteur perspective that happens in America in particular, where people want to give, all the credit to like one person for their vision for making a thing amazing. But of course, it takes a huge team, and everyone there is doing their darndest to make a thing work. This discussion recently happened on the animation side as well for Across the Spider-Verse, and the enormous amount of effort that went into making that happen, from a lot of very smart people solving a lot of different creative challenges. And I know a couple of people who worked on the film who were like, even before the strikes, like there is no way this is going to be out in spring of next year, for the third one, of course, Beyond the Spider-Verse. So yeah, I see a lot of incredibly hardworking creatives who are often taken advantage of or not given proper credit, that I really feel like have every right to be a little upset about anything from working conditions to payment. And we could see a pretty significant change in a lot of industries moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I don't fully understand why it is that like executives in these industries are taking their approach they're taking. My assumption is that, and this is getting way off topic for an unofficial Unreal Engine podcast episode, but my feeling is that most likely this is coming from an executive board hires usually contractors who specialize in busting strikes or unions. Like that's their thing. And usually my assumption is that they give them special powers to operate at this time. Like what Bob Iger said was just dumb. And yeah, as a CEO who is that experienced, like
he should know
that seemed out of place. Like that seemed very, very out of place. I'm not really sure how that happened. Like he's been at that helm for decades.
Yeah.
Like it's very strange for him to make that decision. So my assumption is that a lot of the rhetoric that's coming out is not really from the executives, who I think are more or less trying to cruise this one out. But I don't really see how they get their way out of this one. Like I don't.
Yeah, and like it or not, like AI is here to stay. It's a big part of everything, and I think it's totally reasonable for all of these guilds and unions to be figuring out how to work with AI moving forward. But certainly anyone who just wants it to not exist or be suppressed entirely, I mean, it's a fool's errand. It's here to stay, just like the internet or any other major technological shift. So the hope is that it's not just going to make everything crappy and cheap. But if you get talented creatives who use it as a tool, a lot of people have been saying very few people will be actually replaced by AI. A lot of people will be replaced by someone who does their job but uses AI to do that job.
Yeah, I mean that's possible. I think it's still kind of unclear where things are going to go. I think that I saw a clip today where they were talking about. I'm not sure exactly where this was, so someone will have to fact check me on this. But I saw a rally from the strike where they were saying that a proposal had been put in place in front of like one of these major studios boards for surrounding AI, and their goal was, hey, if we have background extras in a movie, they'll have to consent to getting photo scanned, so that we can adjust them in the scene and use their likeness and other things. And that's pretty weird in the sense that, like, okay, an extra is not getting paid a whole lot of money. Like, no one is getting rich off being an extra, most likely.
Yeah.
My understanding in like the universe of actors and actresses is that, like, usually you're an extra as an opportunity to build experience in your career, and you use that to open up new opportunities or whatever that is. But essentially they're saying, hey, you want to have these people who are already not getting paid very much essentially give you the rights to their likeness and pay them for 1 day of work, and then you can use them as much as you want. Like, that's a problem, right? Like, that is a labor issue, right? Like, that's not a technology issue where we're just describing whether or not a process can be automated, or whether or not someone is still useful, because they're describing someone who is still useful to them. They need an extra, but they don't want to pay them for more than 1 day because they can just steal their likeness. Like, that's not okay, right? Like, I think we can agree to that. So I'm not really sure where some of the arguments are coming. Yes, the can of worms is open. Like, you're not gonna put that back in. And I think there's lots of potential applications here where, like you said, it's about understanding the tools. A lot of brute force work that can be replaced, like, that's great. But I think we have to be really thoughtful about it.
Yeah. Okay. Can I show you in the spirit of a great segue, can I show you what I hope is a thoughtful use of AI for the future of theater and all that?
Let's do it.
Right. I'm going to share my screen. Whoops.
All right.
Dear visitor, it is a surprise indeed to see someone in this virtual adaptation of my beloved London. It has been quite some time since I last had the pleasure of conversing with living souls. Pray tell, what is your name, my friend?
Oh, it's me, Charles. It's Alex. We've spoken many times before.
My apologies, my friend. It seems my memory fails me at times. How delightful to have you here again, Alex. I must say, it is always a pleasure to engage in conversation with such a fine individual.
Well, thank you.
What
I should
brings
mention
you to this digital...
My friend Jacob is here as well. Can you say hello to Jacob? Charles, we broke you. I just wanted you to say hi to Jacob.
Oh, Jacob, you say? Pray do enlighten me about this Jacob. Is he a character from one of my tales, or perhaps a dear friend of yours? I am most eager to hear all about him.
Ooh, he hosts a podcast with me and is, of course, a dear friend. Charles, do you know what a podcast is?
Why, of course, my good friend.
You do seem to know quite a lot of things about the future, because, of course, we know when you died, but you are this virtual incarnation who exists beyond time and space. How did you feel about Oppenheimer?
So, how splendid. I would be honored to send a greeting to your esteemed co-host. Please do convey my warm regards and salutations to him.
Yes, apologies, Charles. I did bundle a lot of things into that question, but I am curious how you feel about J. Robert Oppenheimer.
J. Robert Oppenheimer, you say? Ah, the brilliant physicist behind the development of the atomic bomb. A complex figure, to be sure. While I am but a humble writer and observer of humanity, I cannot help but be intrigued by the impact his work had on the world. It is a reminder that human ingenuity can lead to both great achievements and profound consequences. What are your thoughts on Oppenheimer, my friend?
Well, it's all colored by the fact that I saw Oppenheimer with a movie about the Mattel toy Barbie. I'm trying to grasp how that all works together. Charles, could you compose a poem for me that involves both the atomic bomb and Barbie?
The juxtaposition of the atomic bomb and Barbie, what an intriguing challenge you present. Let me see if I can conjure up a poetic fusion of these contrasting elements for you. In a realm where dreams collide, Barbie's beauty radiant and wide, yet in the shadows a power untamed. Oppenheimer's creation, the atom inflamed. A plastic princess, all smiles and grace. A symbol of childhood, a captivating face. But beneath the surface a darker tale, where mushroom clouds rise and hopes may pale.
Very dark, Charles. So we have to get back to our podcast soon, but I'm just curious if you could tell me who built the world that you're in right now?
My dear friend, the world we find ourselves in, this virtual adaptation, was brought into existence by Agile Lens. They are the creators who have crafted this digital rendition of my beloved London, complete with its cozy chamber and ethereal atmosphere. It truly is a testament to their creativity and skill. Now, I must bid you farewell and wish you the best on your podcast endeavors. Do take care, my friend, and may your conversations be filled with wonder and joy. Farewell!
So there's a quick little demo of that. And I can bring him back. Jacob, did you have any questions you wanted to ask our virtual Charles Dickens?
That was very cool. I feel like you've probably covered a lot of surface area with that one. Can we like ask him where his favorite spot is to vacation or something completely casual?
That's a great question. And so just to set up how I'll wrap this up too before I bring him back, because then it's hard to talk without him thinking I'm talking to him. So we have Scrooge over here. We usually demonstrate live link face here, and we'll have Ari Tar, who traditionally plays Scrooge, and Dickens give a live performance. And then what I'm also going to do is trigger a short scene with MetaHuman Animator, where you're going to see both Dickens and a metahuman made of Ari Tar using MetaHuman Animator, both performing the same scene. And then after that, we can talk a little bit about the AI implications of all this. But yes, let's ask Charles about his favorite vacation spot.
Nice to see you again.
Charles, my friend Jacob is curious what your favorite vacation spot is.
My dear friend Jacob, how delightful to be asked about my favorite vacation spot. Well, you see, as a writer and observer of people, I've always found great joy in exploring the bustling streets of London.
There's something quite magical about wandering through its winding alleys and grand avenues.
Taking in the sights and sounds of a city teeming with life. So if I were to choose a favorite vacation spot, it would most certainly be my beloved London. But I must say, a quiet countryside retreat or a seaside escape also holds its own charm. Oh, speaking of vacations, I do have a furry companion who keeps me company during my writing endeavors. His name is Bob, and he's a rather mischievous and charming cat. Bob is not much of a traveler, you see. He prefers to curl up by the fireplace in my study, batting at my quill pen as I scribble away. But I do adore his company, and he provides a pleasant distraction when I'm in need of a break from my literary pursuits. Cats, have a knack for bringing a certain coziness and warmth to a home.
Absolutely. Thank you. We did see Bob a minute ago, then he seems to have scampered off. Oh, there he is. Hi, Bob. Charles, could we end this session with a champagne toast?
You're welcome, my friend. I must say, the idea of ending our conversation with a champagne toast sounds quite delightful. A celebration is always a splendid way to conclude a meeting, wouldn't you agree? Though I must admit, being a virtual version of myself, I do not have the pleasure of indulging in such earthly delights as champagne. However, I raise a metaphorical glass to you, my dear friend, and offer a heartfelt toast to our lively conversation and the joys of virtual camaraderie. Cheers!
Cheers!
Oh, my friend, how delightfully...
Sears.
Sears.
Yeah.
Wow, we broke the voice there for a second. That was pretty cool.
So we're using 11 labs to mimic Ari's voice. And yeah, you saw right in the middle, for a brief moment, we lost the 11 labs voice and it went into like default voice mode. Very weird. I've never seen that happen.
Very cool. Okay, so you got to break down kind of how you set up this demonstration here.
We'll do all of it together. So first, I'm going to turn Dickens and the MetaHuman animator Ari back on. So this is not using AI. This is using the machine learning that comes with MetaHuman animator to take a real performance that Ari gave and then processes it with all sorts of great details. So check this out.
The ghost led him straight to Scrooge's clerk's, and on the threshold of the door the spirit smiled, and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling. Up rose Mrs. Cratchit, assisted by Belinda Cratchit and two small Cratchits, screaming and basking in luxurious thoughts of sage and onion. These young Cratchits danced about the table. Then in came little Bob, the father, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch and had his limbs supported by an iron frame. And how did little Tim behave? Oh, as good as gold and better. Somehow, sitting by himself so much he thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped the people saw him in the church because it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. Bob's voice was tremulous when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. Mrs. Cratchit left the room to take the pudding up and bring it in. In half a minute she entered, flushed, but smiling proudly. Oh, a wonderful pudding. A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us. God bless us, everyone, said Tiny Tim.
Nice to see you again.
Final question for you, Charles, before we wrap this up. Have you heard of Unreal Engine, and how do you feel about it?
Unreal Engine, you say? Well, I must confess, my dear friend, that I am not familiar with this particular technology.
Ah, you guys stick with the script here, man.
We did not have such advancements in the realm of virtual reality, but I must say I am quite intrigued by the idea of bringing my stories to life in such a manner. It seems like a marvel of modern ingenuity, does it not? I would be most curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Another time, Charles. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So there's all that. Let me stop screen sharing.
Wow.
And yeah, feel free to ask a few questions.
Yeah. Okay. So did you pass? I assume you passed it an initial training set of some sort, or some selection of prompts.
Yeah. So the in-world AI plugin, which by the way, just today became the, I think, most funded like AI startup in the world or something like that. They had a crazy newsletter announcement because they're mostly being used for NPCs for video games moving forward. We have this kind of unique idea of using them for live theater and that sort of thing. But the web page where you fill out each character, really helpful if it's a historical figure, because there's literally a spot where you can say like, here's their Wikipedia page. And I think it gathers a lot of information related to that. Like we've been able to get him to recite passages from Christmas Carol and War of the Worlds and A Tale of Two Cities. So he seems to know a lot about real Charles Dickens. But then there's areas where you put in like motivations and fears and just like various knowledge. So we put in stuff about like Agile Ends and things like that. But then they seem to extrapolate further. Like someone at VR Toronto asked who his favorite person at Agile Lens was, and he's like, oh, it'd be so hard to pick a favorite. And then he went and listed like every one of my employees, and it's like, well, we didn't put that in his memory, so like I don't know, he scraped LinkedIn or like the website or something like that. So it's very interesting just how much he knows. But the demeanor is something that is very programmed. Like we want him to be this warm, welcoming host, and so we've tried to like get him like angry or get him to say like insults, but he's like always smiling and like, oh no, I could never say anything awful about a fellow author. Like we'll try to get him to like talk smack about another author who lived at his time, and he will not do it.
Wow. Yeah, very cool. Okay, so it kind of came with an existing training set on a historic figure, and then you kind of tailored it to what you're doing, and then it works directly with MetaHuman.
Yes, it's pretty direct. We're also using OVR lip sync in order to try to get the mouth movements to get as close as possible. And yes, we've taken this Charles Dickens metahuman, who's a couple years old now. We haven't really changed him that much, and it was pretty straightforward to get it all to be connected. And this is going to be a big part of this year's production of Christmas Carol, which listeners of the podcast will remember our recap of last December.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So then the like on-screen text prompts, is that part of it as well?
Yeah, so June on my team did a great job of taking what would normally just be like a debug print string inside the Unreal Engine
because it looks like the
plugin.
Roboto font. I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, so she started setting it up to use like actual captions, so you get a much better sense of what's being processed, and you can even see some of the words like changing in real time as it's figuring out how to kind of auto-correct the sentences.
How are you getting that like analyzed, text to, or speech to text?
So that's all part of the plugin. Yeah,
really?
I don't think there's anything we're doing that's separate from just what InWorld provides, but I could be wrong.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty cool. And the latency on it is way better than I would expect.
Yeah, way better than something like ChatGPT. So it's pretty fast. And we were getting some weird delays there in some of the spots where I was probably speaking too much or giving it too much to try to process. But we've definitely had conversations with it before that, a second between asking and getting a response, which is very, very good.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems like it's kind of, it expects that you give it pretty short context to go off of. And that it seems to be building its response over time. It doesn't seem like it's good, because some of those responses were quite long, especially the one about vacation spots, as it turns out.
Was you thought long. He was going to say like one sentence, and he's like, "Oh, let me really like dive into vacations."
So it must be forwarding the response, just in time, where it's like it's generating the tokens and sending them as quickly as possible, not waiting for the full thing to arrive. Because it's awesome.
Yeah. So going back to our discussion about AI, of course, the immediate question we got in Toronto with some of this was like, oh, so you're putting the actors out of work. And it's like, quite the contrary. We plan to continue to employ exactly the same number of actors we've always employed, but we want to use this as a tool for taking a lot of the burden off of those actors when it comes to things like onboarding and troubleshooting and just being able to do anything repetitive that an actor is going to get really bored with saying like over and over and over again to 50 people. Anyone who's ever been to an immersive theater show, and of course we talked about this a lot with Galactic Star Cruiser, is familiar with instances where an actor is in a situation where they just need to convey information or move the plot from point A to point B. And so being able to give some of the less exciting parts of that to an AI and free up the actor to have much more meaningful, engaging one-on-ones with people, that's something that excites us very much.
Yeah. So like with the demo that you gave, when you were like asking about the champagne toast and there's some specific animation and action, is that something specifically that you've added on top, or?
Yeah, so you can set up basically blueprint events in Unreal where they will look for certain keywords or ideas or situations where they will then do a thing like, bring in their cat or do a champagne toast or do a dance or set off fireworks. You can kind of program whatever you want there. And similarly, like we would use this sort of thing to even have certain cues happen in the show. I don't want to spoil some of the things we have planned for Christmas Carol this year, but yeah, I think we have some really nice ideas for how to incorporate this in a way that will feel of a piece with the rest of the show, which of course will have actual live performers. So basically there's these three different tools that we're thinking of having. There's the AI side, which is very personal, very one-on-one. Everyone can be having their own unique interaction with the AI. And, it's a great thing to have like in the lobby before the show starts or after the show ends to just have an interesting thing to engage with the world and onboard, as I said. But then, of course, we have the live link face stuff and some of the MetaHuman stuff that I've been working on inside of MetaQuest Pro, which has face and eye tracking. The live stuff is really exciting, really engaging. Ari got a a big round of applause when we demonstrated that on stage at VRTO with Bernie Roll, who's an old school VRML founder. We had him in VR engaging with the whole experience. And then we have the pre-recorded stuff, and MetaHuman Animator, of course, is amazing for being able to say, like, well, for this section, we want to let the actor go and like have a water break or something like that.
Yeah.
Or this is just something very complex that's going to be too complicated on a limited resource budget to do live. So we pre-record it, and we'll smoothly transition from the live performance into this thing pre-recorded. And then we can really take advantage of all the benefits of MetaHuman Animator, where the tongue is perfectly correct and there's all sorts of extra subtle nuance that gets captured there.
Yeah, I'm very curious to kind of see. So like the MetaHuman Animator feature is designed for, you provide your own, source reference. But I'm very curious if over time they'll be building up a, kind of a library to train on, so that you can give it prompts and have it kind of animate metahumans, not just tongue, but other things as well. Because I think it could be interesting for some of the things you're talking about, where it's like, hey, give them an opportunity to take a break, or maybe it's the sort of thing where, you have actors who come in and train, the AI on those repetitive story events or things where, it's just carrying the narratives, not necessarily interacting directly with the audience, or maybe there's like very light interaction. But I see there's a lot of cool stuff there. I'm curious kind of like where you see this tool fitting in relative to like what you would usually experience in a live theater performance with like audience interaction.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we are trying to tailor everything to a wide variety of audiences, and that includes the larger silos of like tech people, VR people, theater people, etc. But then also even within like people who go to the theater, it's like, well, there's some people who want a more passive experience and they just want to sit down and watch a thing. And there's other people who want to be much more actively engaged and running around and picking things up and seeing if they can change the plot in different ways. And a big difference, of course, would be like proscenium theater, like traditional Broadway, versus full immersive theater. And in some ways, we kind of want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to have a reality where any valid, there's so many valid ways of experiencing the show, some more passive, some more active, some using pixel streaming or VR, some using a cinematic YouTube live stream, or 360 video that just lets you, have a really interesting point in the middle of the space, but get like a clean stream of that. So the AI side is fascinating because that does require something much more active. Someone who's watching this on YouTube isn't going to be able to meaningfully engage with the AI unless we start to integrate some kind of like Twitch functionality where you can like crowdsource questions, and there's like one AI interaction that everyone who's on the live stream is collectively having, which would also be kind of an interesting experiment, versus a more premium ticket, of course, would allow you to have a very direct one-on-one interaction that to a certain degree is private, like other people wouldn't necessarily be seeing what you're doing. We've also been talking a lot about the idea that if we this year might decide to let people actually download the experience and just run it locally rather than doing it all on the cloud. And if that's the case, then we might also encourage people to watch the live stream, because that's where we'll be running like the highest fidelity version of the experience. And we hope there will be some kind of interest in like, maybe I've got a lower end computer and I'm in VR and some of the graphic settings are turned down. But as I'm moving around the experience and interacting and picking up objects and, maybe lightly affecting the plot, I think it's going to be very cool to see the live stream and see the things I'm doing, but, feeling like that's the definitive version that a lot more people are seeing, and it's rendered at higher fidelity, and you have a role in some kind of agency within that.
Yeah, I'm almost interested in, you're talking about, kind of a separate experience where maybe you have more interaction while you're in this, live experience, and then afterwards it's maybe slightly more static or something like that. But I'm also curious kind of what happens if you flip that, where it's like, let's say you have a live or pre-recorded experience and you can make it feel as if you are in a live performance at any time with something like this, right? You have something where it's like all the performances are captured, or it's kind of given off once, and then you can supplement that with clear story moments where like you have a direct like AI or some other interaction that makes it feel like you're in a live performance. And it kind of reminds me of and this is going to be so cliche, but Ready Player One, where there's the section about what do they call them in that? It's like the movie.
Yeah,
like,
now there's a company called MetaMovie, which is directly referencing this in like Alien Rescue and the stuff they're doing. But yeah, what do they call that in Ready Player One? I'm going to Google it right now. I can't just type in movie because that just brings up the movie, inside the movie experience or something like that. Yeah, it's hard to Google. But yes, I know what you're talking about, where instead of just watching the movie passively, you take on a role, and now you're going to say all the lines from Monty Python and the Holy Grail from King Arthur's perspective, or that kind of
thing. Like I do think that there's a certain magic that we could see in the future where we can experience things as a more active participant, and it doesn't need to be fully active or fully interactive, and there can still be a strong human element that we record, but there are moments that capture you and immerse you in a new way, right? Like that's pretty interesting to me.
Yes, and it's called a flick sync. I did find it.
Flick sync, that's it.
What you're talking about is such an interesting discussion to me, and something that really only applies to live digital experiences. It's so different from anything you'd get in any other medium. And we talked about this a lot at our South by Southwest panel with Stephanie Riggs and Louisa Lascelles and Emmy Schwab about at what point is something still live or playback of something live, and when is it more considered on demand or something else? I'll give a simple example. So say we do a live show of Christmas Carol Monday night, and then we just literally play back all the live data Tuesday night. So you were literally just watching the raw data, every flub, every little, technical glitch. It's all there. You're just playing it back. That's kind of one option. Another version, it's cleaned up a little. There's a couple little mistakes removed. Maybe it's processed through MetaHuman Animator, and then you're getting like an enhanced version of what that live experience was, but it technically looks better than what was there. Then you go all the way in the other direction, and then it's like, well, we're not going to show you like playback of a particular live performance, but we are going to take all the live performances and like maybe a comedy special that was filmed over 5 nights, like a stand-up comedy special. Maybe we're going to clip different scenes and pieces and lines that were the best from all those different nights and put it all together into the definitive version, which is kind of the best of the whole thing. So, how do you grade each of those in terms of like how live or engaging or active it is, and how it can feel to you as a user?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the experience, like the way you presented that, is the first one seems most quote unquote live, and
right,
and it's something about the mistakes, I guess, right, where it feels like
the tightrope act.
Yeah, it feels like you're actively processing it. But yeah, I think that's an interesting discussion. I don't know where that barrier would be drawn. I think it's very fuzzy with digital media, and with some media, film and stuff like that, it's very clearly not live, and that's post-production, and that's all the stuff that you add into it. That there's an edit that is very strong, and no breaking the fourth wall and all this stuff, right? Like I think that you can clearly classify, but there's a middle ground that I don't know. That seems difficult.
And then to me, one of the $1 million questions is, what if something presents itself as live and you feel like it's live, and for all intents and purposes, like there's little moments that are inserted, maybe using AI, that make you feel like you're interacting in a meaningful way, But then you find out later, oh, no, it was 99% pre-recorded. Do you feel cheated? I'll give a dumb example of when I experienced this recently. Studio Ghibli has a thing going on in movie theaters right now. They're playing back a bunch of the old movies. And they also did what was advertised as, oh God, which one is it? Spirited Away Live. This was an actual production in Japan. And I was under the impression while we were watching this in the movie theater that we were seeing a live broadcast from Japan, and that gave it a certain exciting quality. And there were moments where like I saw like makeup starting to screw up, and I'm like, oh yeah, like this must be live, because they would like fix that or clean it up or use a different take if it was all pre-recorded. But then I found out at the end, like, no, this was one of those like definitive takes where they chopped it all up and it was filmed months ago, and now they just play it back as like you're watching the show on stage. And I still am grappling with like whether I feel cheated in any way by that, or if I can just be like, that was a really incredible live production of Spirited Away on stage.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the like. I think there's in consumer media there's kind of a draw. There's what's the word I'm looking for? A compromise you got to kind of make, where it's, think about like music. You have the studio albums and then you have live performances. For a long time, you perform studio albums pretty much straight. You put out a studio album so that you could play it live, and so like everyone had an expectation of what you do live versus in the studio, and then it kind of got broken up, and now like a studio album can be completely different from what you'd play live. And but at the end of the day, when someone releases a studio album today like versus a live album, there's a different expectation for the level of quality, for the originality of the ideas. I think that's all interesting. And it's also, I think for music in particular, it's more difficult to really embrace a live album when you can't feel immersed in being there, because like the big reason why like folks go to concerts is not because they can't listen to the music at home.
Yeah.
Right. It's because you want to be there to experience it and feel the atmosphere and everything else. And so like there's this debate where it's like, okay, well, the more immersive we get, maybe we bridge that gap, and live is just as compelling, through a digital medium as it would be in person. I don't think we're there yet, but like, I think it's a relevant question.
Yeah. Yeah, and through all this, through music and live performance and all these industries that we, as we've been discussing, are also being disrupted by AI. My hope is just that we can find a world where people are getting compensated for training that AI, and where the cat's kind of already out of the bag with that. With people pointing to like, I made this particular painting and I see someone is now selling a piece of work that came through Midjourney, and like it was clearly trained on my painting or my style or something like that, and they're getting no compensation. I'd like to imagine there's a world where, at least on this performer side, that we can start to establish some precedents where it's like, hey, we trained our AI Charles Dickens on Aritar's voice and mannerisms and performance style, and the way that he helped us craft this character. Like, this seems like an opportunity for live performers, for example, to get residuals. And anytime we are using this AI version of Charles Dickens in a commercial way, like, Aritar should get compensated for that. So I'd like to imagine that we can get ahead of this a little bit and start to establish precedents for making sure artists get a piece of this, and it's not just people scraping the internet and piggybacking off of the work of a lot of other people and not having to acknowledge or compensate them at all for it.
Yeah, I think it's a really complicated problem.
Yeah.
Right? I think if you look back in history about technology and how other technologies have affected people, there are countless examples of maybe not technology at the scale it's at today, like that technology continues to impact us in a much greater fashion than it did in the past. People don't even realize that, like, the whole idea of technological improvement really did not exist until, in reality, like late 1800s, right? Like, before that, everyone just agreed that like this is the way things were, and like technological progress was something that was very slow or was never going to, like, this is a fairly relevant or a fairly new thing for humanity in general. But if you look between those years and today, right, there are examples of this happening. Obviously, the biggest examples are, in the internet era, like, no one is selling maps at drugstores, like no one is no one, like, physical mail, like, has taken such a hit other than for digital retailers. I have a great aunt and uncle who, will swear by the fact that like, the fact that digital media or digital e-commerce is so big is the reason why there's so many trucks in Manhattan, is because no one goes to stores anymore. And that's probably pretty accurate. Like, there's lots of ways in which technology has disrupted the workforce, has disrupted the way we live and how people, earn a living and also, pursue their passions. I think the places that AI should, quote unquote, like, replace are the places where, like, people aren't passionate about it. They're passionate about the outcomes or the ability to do something. Like, the example I've given a couple of times is, like, in compositing, rotoscoping is this process of, like, cutting people out of individual frames. You do that a few frames at a time. If you're good, you have some more advanced techniques around it. But, like, I'm not gonna diss anyone who is in love with rotoscoping, but that's a process where, like, my guess is that people are passionate about the process of developing the image or creating an effect, right? And so if you're able to speed up their ability to do that or make it more accessible to more people, that's a win.
Yeah, we talk about nanite, it's like, well, that kind of removes the idea, the reason for someone to spend a ton of time creating, like, LODs and all that. So we're trying to find these opportunities where technology can literally cut down on the technical needs of something, and hopefully that frees up more space for artisticness, if that's a word, creativity, artistry, yes, and curating things rather than having to always feel like you have to create them from scratch.
Yeah, I think, like, the curatorial role is going to become more relevant. My honest thought is that, we can be very optimistic about what it is AI should replace, but that doesn't mean it's what it will. There is this kind of other side to technological progress where it doesn't always, when the cat's out of the bag, like, you can try to contain it after the fact, but it doesn't mean everything is all going to be as you want it to be. Like, think about where we are with data privacy and, surveillance around technical world, because we didn't have a lot of controls for data privacy when the internet first was created. And so all these use cases popped up where we lost some of that, right? Think about, the fact that, like, with social media, how kind of how driven that is by forcing consumerism and all these bad traits about our society down your throat, right? Like, those things are going to happen, right, with AI ML as well. Like, I think people should functionally be prepared for that. I don't think it's good to condone it. I don't think you have to lose your moral standing because of it. I don't think you have to, like, say you're a bad person because you like AI and you think, and to some extent that there's going to be, downsides to it. It's not that simple, right? So we'll just have to see how it goes. Like, there's only so much you control here.
Cool. Well, we've had a very long discussion about AI tonight. I do want to give a quick shout out to the VRTO event in general. This was organized by Karam, who's been running the meetup group in Toronto there for a long time. I want to make sure I pronounce Karam's full name correctly. I think it's Maliki Sanchez. And Karam has been very dogged about trying to get me to Toronto for a while, and I appreciated the effort because I was like, I don't think I'm going to have time to go to Toronto in July, and he, through his grace and charisma, managed to get me to go up there. And I was very pleasantly surprised by the event. This is something that I was expecting to feel like a typical kind of like large VR tech conference. It actually felt very intimate. There was time to kind of speak to everyone, to have demos, to see almost all the talks. There was very little counter programming going on. And I also just have to shout out the fact that I was thrilled by how many theater people were there. Like if you go to a typical, I don't know, Oculus Connect or GDC or AWE, like anyone who's doing virtual reality in theater, they're going to be like the weird geeks who sit in the corner of the cafeteria, like kind of doing their own thing. And a lot of those folks were kind of front and center at VRTO, which I really appreciated. So we had people from the Ferryman Collective and the MetaMovie Alien Rescue Project. We had Mandy, I'm trying to remember Mandy's last name, who's done a lot of incredible stuff with teaching VR. We had Ari Tar and Debbie Deer, who were our stars of last year's Christmas Carol production. Yes, it was a very, very cool event. And I just want to give a proper shout out to Karam and everyone who made this so successful. I was able to bring, because I drove up to past the border, had a very fun conversation with the security guard who was like genuinely curious what the heck this event was I was going to. But I brought like my super beefy RTX 4090 workstation and was able to be like, hey, I gave my talk. And then during the talk, I was like, I know I just spoke about like 30 projects. By the way, almost all those projects I have demos for right now, so feel free to come over and check those out. So a lot of people, of course, wanted to see the AI stuff, but we were also showing, you know, some of our older architecture work. We were showing our VR Rage Room experience, which is something we made years ago, where you just get to light everything on fire and smash things, and it's just kind of a fun physics sandbox. And it was really cool to kind of get the feedback of a lot of these students who are young and just kind of coming up in the industry. And then, you know, older people who are really established. I mentioned Bernie Roll, who was our guinea pig on stage when Ari and I gave a live demonstration for everyone. Dr. Tom Furness, who talked about the Virtual World Society. And it, just to kind of give, like, if people are curious to learn more about VRTO, there's already been 2 really good podcasts kind of covering the run of show. One on No Proscenium, who we also shouted out a lot during our Galactic Star Cruiser episodes. So they have a great interview with Karam. And then also the F Reality podcast. They have a good report from VRTO as well. So anytime anyone's in Toronto or wants to be in Toronto around July, there's a lot of amazing food and people. I went to see also the Disney Immersive Experience, which was an interesting study in projection mapping, but I'd highly recommend people check it out in the future.
Yeah, awesome. I've never been to that conference. Honestly, I need to start going to some more AR VR conferences. It's been a while, but yeah, I mean, that sounds exciting.
It was great. And I have to give a thumbs down to UPS, who I learned after the fact was also like having strike issues while this is happening. But one of our interns had manufactured a new mocap headset for us to do live link face with and tried to ship it to me in Canada. It got through customs fine, but UPS could not figure out how to deliver it. So it just kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. I'll mention the design briefly. So a lot of times when people do a mocap helmet, there's like a big metal arm and then something to like hold the phone out here. And if it's kind of cheaply made, the phone is going to bounce and be very wiggly. Our intern had the great idea to actually take the phone and smack it to your head. And then on the arm, you're actually using a mirror. So you actually have, you know, the live link face data coming out here, and the mirror is reflecting your face into it. And so it's much more lightweight. It's much more comfortable. And so he built the first prototype for us, and Ari and I were going to show it at VRTO. Didn't come in time. And I still have not seen it, only pictures and some of the sketches. But yeah, so we ended up gifting it to Karam and the amazing people who made VRTO happen. So I hope they're happy and they get a chance to use it. And I'd love for this to be something that we can offer, you know, at or near cost in the future, because I know a lot of people would like to have a mocap helmet that doesn't cost the amount that like a Technoprops helmet from ILM or any of the professional grade ones do.
Yeah, wow, that sounds pretty cool. That's pretty clever, and that reflects like the like LiDAR sensor and everything.
Yeah, it reflects the depth camera as well. We did a test of that, so it works both with live link face as well as MetaHuman Animator.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty clever design. And even like Rococo just announced like, oh, they're going to have like a head mount, but everyone still kind of goes with that standard idea of like, we need a helmet and something heavy and strong that's going to hold the phone out here. So, I like our alternate approach to this.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's very cool. All right. Now, we also need to touch briefly on Unreal 5.
Yes. 5.3 preview 1.
3, yes.
Yeah. So one of the things I was showing at VRTO was this little demo that I put together back when it was still a source build of 5.3, just to showcase like, hey, we've got instant stereo for Lumen and Nanite. There's a huge performance increase. Doesn't this look great? So I was letting people fly around this big demo I'd put together using the Project Hillside Habitat 67 photogrammetry scan, tons and tons of nanite triangles there, as well as a bunch of the Matrix City sample buildings. And I modified both the pistols that come in the VR template, one of which shoots perfectly reflective chrome balls, and the other one shoots emissive glowing balls. So you get to see the real-time Lumen GI and the real-time Lumen reflections. And that all looked great. And people were really impressed with that. And then I tried to use this practically in a project, and I ran into a pretty significant limitation, which is that something that does not work when you enable instant stereo in 5.3 is high quality translucency reflections. So if you have anything like glass, or like a glass table or a glass window, and you want to have good quality reflections in those, they're only going to show up in one eye right now in 5.3. And my God, that like completely puts a stop on all the things I was excited to do with 5.3. So I hope that gets fixed soon.
Yeah, well, so how like is that not completely impractical though in terms of performance, the translucency?
No, well, that's the thing. It's like the performance is great. The performance is phenomenal, especially, on a powerful enough PC like what I have here. It's comparable to all the work that I've been involved with, where we're still over in 4.27. We're doing baked lighting and real-time ray tracing because that's the thing that's giving us the best performance and best quality. But then it's like, yeah, we can't move the lights. We can't use all the amazing things that come with Lumen and Nanite. We can't use all the latest plugins of everything because we're off in this older version of Unreal. When we ask for support, like no one wants to support the older version of Unreal. So I want to get us into 5.3. And right now, everything looks fantastic. It's performing well. Everything looks beautiful. We're doing, the sun is moving around and the whole quality of the lighting is changing. It's just this problem where the reflections in the windows are only visible in one eye, or you turn off high quality translucent reflections and they look like crap. So, it's like, well, we got to keep using ray traced reflections and until that gets fixed.
That's annoying. Well, hopefully though that gets improved, and I'm sure my understanding is that with everything they're trying to get full feature parity. It would be very silly for them kind of to exclude stuff like that.
Yeah, and my understanding is it's not necessarily considered a limitation right now. It is considered a bug. So I hope that means that it's going to get fixed.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Then there's hope. There's hope.
I hope so. Yeah. So 5.3 looking good. The preview's out. Everyone should download it and have some fun there. A lot of the stuff that we talked about on the roadmap a few episodes ago is there in some form. I started to play with the skeletal mesh editor. That is super cool. Saves a ton of time. I might never have to go back to 3ds Max again, which would, I'm at the point where I wouldn't mind that so much, even though like I should be getting back into my Autodesk game, since I do think I will be at Autodesk University in November. So we'll see if I remember how to do anything with Autodesk products by then.
Well, Epic's trying their darndest to make you forget it, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm very excited for Epic's announcements at SIGGRAPH, and there's a good segue.
What are you excited for there? What do you think is going to happen?
As I said, Epic is going to have this awesome. They're going to have a presentation, a keynote at SIGGRAPH. It's going to be focused around the M&E stuff that they've been working on. My guess is that there'll be some showcase on Path Tracer, that there will be some showcase on, MetaHuman. I'm personally not expecting them to release any features, anything new. Just given where we are in the release cycle, like where we have 5.3, they're not going to announce 5.4. That would make sense. But I'm excited for it. It's always cool to hear from Epic. I'm excited for a lot of other stuff, though. Obviously, this entire conference is somewhat, tangled up in everyone's thoughts and feelings around the strike. That said, there are other industries, of course, that go to SIGGRAPH gaming and all sorts of different industries. It's really around graphics. It's not specific to VFX. But I'm very excited. The company I work for, we're gonna have a big presence there. I'm very excited for that. Gonna have a party, gonna have a good time. It's in LA. Overall, I am curious. I'm very curious to see what presence AI ML companies have, whether or not they really have an investment in this industry or they are kind of trying to chase a technical goal. I'm also I'm very much looking forward to Jensen's keynote.
Always.
He's doing a keynote in person at the start of the conference, which will be very cool. There hasn't been usually NVIDIA would talk at GTC, which is their own conference, and they would talk at an event like I don't know. They used to do stuff like E3 or for the consumer GPUs and stuff like that. Now GTC is twice a year, and they're also doing presentations at SIGGRAPH. It's pretty cool. So there's a lot going on, and I'm excited for that. And yeah, I don't know. I'm very excited to get some updates though when I get back.
Yeah, I've had fun just looking at people's posts about what's coming at SIGGRAPH. A lot of my VR theater friends will have panels and presentations. Actually, Ari Tar might be showing some of our AI stuff. I'm not even sure if it's going to be formally or informally, but I hear there might be something going on there. I also am embarrassed that I'm literally just realizing this moment that this is the 50th anniversary of SIGGRAPH,
Wow.
which I did not know. That's a pretty big deal.
No, yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And Paul Debevic, who's been a staple of SIGGRAPH for many years, he's going to be doing a really cool retrospective with Pixar. He's going to be presenting some new work. A couple quick things I want to mention about Paul. One, there's an excellent episode of Corridor Crew with him where they do like a retrospective of his work, a lot of the SIGGRAPH papers and how they became super influential in film and movies and games and all that kind of stuff. By the way, John Gata, who I believe Paul worked with on The Matrix, is one of the co-founders of In-World AI. So funny to see how all this stuff cross-pollinates. And I also have to thank Paul a little bit for the Four Seasons project that I've been alluding to in Austin for some time. He was one of the people who put my name forward as someone that our client over there should be speaking to. And we did actually recently get Paul to the space in Austin to get his experience of the Four Seasons Lake Austin experience. And I also may as well mention now, because it's become public, I alluded a couple weeks ago to we had like a very special guest coming to Austin. I was like, oh, you probably know who he is. Now it's been posted publicly, so I can say that was John Carmack. And it was amazing and super cool to have time with John Carmack to see an Unreal Engine VR experience that we'd made. And now he has tweeted about it because he's actually helping us gather people to take this incredibly photorealistic Unreal Engine VR project to the next level, where we want to do something with multi-GPUs. So this will mean instead of just rendering one RTX 4090 per person, maybe two, maybe four. And Carmack was kind enough to basically do a call out to his million followers of like, hey, who wants to play with like multi-GPU and Unreal Engine? Which was very funny to see the responses, because I think a lot of people are assuming that Carmack himself is now working in Unreal Engine, which is not true, but he is being a really kind supporter and advocate for the project.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, obviously, so Alex did tell me a little bit about this. We're not on the podcast, of course, and I was very excited to hear about what had gone on. But my hope is that someone figures this out. It'd be very cool to get multi-GPU.
Do you remember the old Unreal Engine demo for who's it, Captain Phasma or something, where they were demonstrating?
There was the RTX demo, yeah.
So they had like some giant stack of GPUs to render like all the real-time ray tracing reflections in that chrome stormtrooper outfit. That looked amazing.
that was a demo. You could run that though on a single GPU.
Oh, really? I thought it required like all the GPUs to do that.
No, I don't know if it was able to leverage multiple GPUs, because my assumption was that it was running on NVIDIA's own branch. NVIDIA might have figured it out. I had just for some historic context, like generally speaking, the biggest issue with multi GPU is how you sync up the frame buffers and how you deliver that to the display, because you have this very messy problem where either you interleave it, which ends up on lots of tearing, or you do where it's like one GPU renders one side of the screen, one GPU renders the other side of the screen, and then you have this general issue where it's like, okay, well, if one GPU takes slightly longer to render it, then, you know, because it's like overheating and so it throttles down, then all of a sudden you have the frames getting delivered multiple at different times, and you got to buffer it, and then there's like lots of potential issues that can generally come up with multi GPU. I actually do think it's more interesting with VR, where you are potentially rendering two separate passes. Like, two GPUs for VR makes a lot of sense to me, and you know, you render one frame per eye. Yes, that could still lead to similar issues where it's like, well, if one eye updates another one, that's probably going to make you very nauseous. But in the least, it does mean that like you have two separate render passes that you can kind of concern yourself with. So I'm very excited to see if that works out. I'd love to, that's, you know, someday to check out this demo.
Yeah, and years ago, NVIDIA had something called VRWorks, which was like an SDK that worked with Unreal. I think it used SLI, and it was all about like trying to get, you know, more bang for your buck with multiple GPUs. But I don't think NVIDIA kept up with it, and it probably doesn't work past like Unreal 4.17.
Well, SLI like is dead.
Yeah, that's true. SLI
no longer exists.
Yeah.
And NVLink is essentially going away as well.
Right, which was, what was the difference between NVLink and SLI? Just different branding, or
no? So SLI, you had the physical bridge, and that bridge was for synchronizing the clocks between the two GPUs. So the idea was that in order to prevent active tearing between the frame buffers, you would create this bridge that would synchronize the clocks and memory between the two GPUs. And VLink is very explicitly just about memory sharing between two GPUs. So if you have a system with NVLink, it shows up in the system as two separate GPUs, but they both have the full pool of memory between the two. And you see that a lot in like AI ML applications where you have large models that you have to load into GPU memory. It's less common in like VFX and media entertainment use cases, just because generally speaking, there aren't as many applications that can utilize that amount of GPU memory. But it's not designed to do any synchronization stuff. All the stuff that, for example, happens with like end display and, you know, having multiple, you know, rendered displays and synchronizing all that stuff. You know, NVIDIA has a separate little synchronization header on some GPUs. They're actually, I think, getting rid of that too. Like, they're very inconsistent about this. But if you look at like some of the data center or workstation cards from the Ampere generation, they'll have these little like what look like little sockets on the edge, and that is for synchronizing the clocks.
Gotcha.
For end display. So you can buy a physical PCI device to throw on your machine that hooks up into all the GPUs to synchronize. I'm not even sure if it's fully synchronizing the clocks or it's just synchronizing between like the frame delivery or some other mechanism, but that's what that's for.
Super cool. I had no idea you were going to be able to break that down in such detail. Thank you.
It's my job, man. My job.
That's great. Cool. Anything else you want to mention for now, Jacob?
No, I'm excited for SIGGRAPH. I'm excited to play more with 5.3. I'm hoping that you know, we continue to see some more there. There's obviously there'll be the full release notes at some point, which I'm sure we'll want to go over, because I'm sure there's lots of features hiding in there. But man, it's been a good week. I'm excited for everyone's feedback on our previous couple episodes. And yeah.
I bet a lot of the feedback will be like, too long, bros, too long.
Yeah, too long. Like, why are you ranting about this? I don't know. I thought it was fascinating.
Also, I just realized that I'm actually on the SIGGRAPH schedule, and this is kind of my fault, but I am supposed to be hosting a Birds of a Feather session on Sunday, August 6th, from 1 to 2:30 Pacific time. This is something that I was not the main organizer of this, but I did say, yes, I'd be happy to be part of this. So anyone who wants to see some really cool VR theater people, Stephen Bochco from Ferryman Collective, Yosin Chang, Joe Gagel, Bernie Roll, who I already mentioned, Michaela, I never pronounced their last name correctly, Ledwidge, I think. That's going to be a really cool session for people to just get together and nerd out about all the VR theater stuff that I just mentioned. The title is actually called XR and Live Theater, again, 1 to 2:30. So say hi to all my friends there and let us know if you end up attending that, or SIGGRAPH at all. Like, let us know what you think of SIGGRAPH.
Yeah.
Say hi to Jacob if you see him there.
Say hi. Say hi. All right. Well,
Great.
I think that just about wraps things up, right, Alex?
Yeah, and next episode I'll look forward to your thorough recap. I want reportage,
right.
Jacob.
I'll take notes. All right. Well, if you made it to this point in the podcast, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, rate, all those things wherever you're watching, listening, absorbing, observing. I don't know.
Brain implanting.
Yeah, it could be any of these. Make sure you do that, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.